Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
You
Happy
sexy
Valentine's
little
Day.
spooky babies.
Did
You
you
know?
ever have people say Valentine's with an M?
Yeah, 100%. You're just like,
How
you're
does
an
that
idiot.
happen? Yeah.
How did that happen? Before we get in too deep, I'm Olivia.
Oh, yeah, and I'm Amy.
And
And
this
this
is Girls
Girls
Gone
Gone
Spooky. First order of business.
Yes.
Onyx Storm.
Yeah.
For all y'all little fairy smut readers, dragon rider smut readers, the fuck. First of all, I was lost the whole book.
Pretty much, yes.
I understood what was happening, but I didn't remember what happened before, and I had no idea who anyone was other than Violet and Zayden. So, gonna need a reread stat, also because I'm depressed.
Yes, I know. It feels like a missing piece.
Right.
When you have to leave a fantasy
and then you kind of like pick up your phone or your reader or whatever, and you're like, and then you're like, oh.
Yeah. And it's hard to like start a new one, even though now all I want is another storyline like that.
Yeah. I know. Well, there are so many, I will say. Like, they're not all great, but arguably, like, We Love You, Rebecca, not the best writing in the world.
No. Not a Nobel or what? What's
no.
it? Pulitzer.
Yeah. Not a Pulitzer. My mom said that to me one time. She was recommending a book to me, and I don't know why, but the way she said it, she was like, yeah, I mean, it's good. It's not going to win a Pulitzer. And I thought it was like, it was just so funny the way she delivered it. So now it like cracks me up every time someone says that.
Perfect.
I will say, so in hindsight, I read Fourth Wing, Iron Flame, and then the first 4 books of the Black Witch Chronicles while post-op high on Percocet after knee surgery.
Yes.
And so I was like opening Onyx Storm, I was like, why am I so fucking lost? But then I started Dryad Storm. Weird. Dryad Storm, which is the 5th in the Black Witch books, which I do recommend. The writing in terms of like her word choice is better, and it's so like nothing is left to the imagination. And I don't mean like sex scenes. I mean like like she doesn't let the audience come to a conclusion. She's like, and this is why. And you're like, yeah, I got it. Like,
it's very explicit.
There's a lot of that. The story is fun and it's really different and it's really robust, like this world that she built. So it's good. I recommend it. I'm like a third. It's long. It's like 1,400 pages on my like reader. So I don't know how long the actual book would be, like the physical book, but it's really long. But here is my thing. And this is why I'm like, it's kind of on you, Rebecca. Like, yeah, I was high on Percocet, but I was high on Percocet for both. And Laurie Forrest, it reminds you. She's like, this person who's here with this person, and like, remember, like they fell in love at that thing, and like now this is their thing. Like, it's like that part is not in like an explicit annoying way, but the way most like fantasy books do, they kind of are like, hey, this is where we left off. There's just none of that.
No, like at the very start of Onyx Storm, I was like, where are we?
Who's
it just
Bodhi?
didn't explain anything.
Literally, who the fuck are any of these people? So for our readers, let us know what you fucking think, because we've had to read a lot of Reddit threads to understand where we are now.
Yep. I feel like even if I reread it, I would still be like, oh, what?
Probably.
Unless I reread the first 2.
I also think and maybe I shouldn't say we, but you've said this before, so I will say we're not very good at like guessing the long game.
No.
I do not have a single theory. Like me personally, if someone were like, so what do you think is going to happen? I'd be like,
we'll see.
Let's wait and find out. Okay?
Yeah.
Shit. Why am I bad at this?
Yes, I'm the same way.
Oh my God.
I'm reading these books for enjoyment, not to like pick apart. And not to like, oh my gosh, she just said the green thread.
Right.
And I'm gonna remember that.
And I'm gonna remember that detail of like the stuff about the sky. Like, I'm not actually gonna give anything away, but the stuff about the sky, I was like, that could have meant because dragons are, it's just like, I don't, this feels, and also a lot of these theories are going to be wrong. So a lot of them are reading too much into like arbitrary details, essentially. What's funny to me though, it's so brilliant. What's funny to me though is like real life stories like mysteries and stuff like that. I almost always figure out before you're supposed to, which is annoying because like
it spoils
so I'm like, actually, it spoils it. So I'm actually like kind of glad that I don't have that with fantasy. I just like, I'm not wired that way, I guess.
Yeah. Yep. That's good.
I don't know.
Because that's what fantasy should be.
Yeah.
It's just like, and suspense.
I'm escaping my life.
Yes, exactly.
Depressing. Yes. Oh, God.
Yeah, but it's so good.
It's so good. 18 months to go.
So loved it. Oh, really? Is there an official date?
But like sources close to the author have said about 18 months. So, but what I don't know is she spoke at the book launch, I think, about the Amazon series. So I don't know if that's going to come out sooner. Actually, maybe I can check right now.
That would be ideal.
TV series date. What we know about the television adaptation so far. This is so weird. They put a picture of like someone else on the cover. It's like Fourth Wing, the book cover, and then like some random woman. Moira Wally Beckett sitting in a chair next to the cover of Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. It's like, why wouldn't they put Rebecca Yarros?
Who is that? Yeah.
So misleading.
Who is Moira?
No idea. Okay. When will it come out? Has yet to announce a filming date. But they are trying to make it fast, it sounds like. Amazon's investing quite a bit in it. And they don't want to lose out on like the hype.
Yes. Yep.
It's going to be a venture shared between Amazon MGM Studios and Michael B. Jordan's Outlier.
I saw that. Oh, what happened?
There's an ambulance outside.
Uh-oh.
There are a lot of old people in this building. Yeah.
Oh, no. Uh-oh.
They're okay.
Yeah. I hope so too.
Moira Wally Beckett will serve as the showrunner.
Okay. So she is important.
Yeah, I guess so. Casting, dreams, her thoughts on fan art. Depicting Xaden as white, despite her describing him as having warm, tawny skin.
Mm-hmm.
She was like, we're just going to say he's a person of color, and we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
There. Wow. There's literally, it's like, this is an Elle magazine online. It's like, what we know so far about the television adaptation. Literally nothing. Thanks a lot, Elle.
Yeah, just to tease it.
Yeah, what the flock, man.
I'm so excited, though.
Me too. So excited. Holy.
But I see a lot of people that are like, this has to be a cartoon because they're not going to be able to cast the right people. Maybe cartoon is the wrong word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I know.
I don't like that idea.
No.
I'd rather have real people. I could not watch a cartoon.
It's funny that you say that because I was like daydreaming about that as I was falling asleep last night. Like,
really?
The AI depictions are so good of the cast, and it's like, how are they going to source these people? And I was like, oh God, what if they animate? Like the Twilight reboot. The Twilight reboot could be so good live action. They could cast like really good people, and people would be foaming at the fucking mouth for that content.
Yes. Oh. I didn't even know there was going to be a Twilight reboot.
Yeah, but it's a fucking anime. It's like a cartoon. Oh. I don't know if it's TV or Twilight.
Yeah, new animated TV series.
Oh, yeah.
Why? That's a weird choice.
I know. It was announced in 2023, so I don't know when that's going to be.
Wow, I missed that completely.
Yeah. I should have sent it to you. Shame on me.
But shame on you. There's a little crossover here because one of the like fan casts for Violet is the girl that played the creepy little baby.
Yes, Renesmee.
Yeah.
I know, I saw that and I was like, wait, ew, no. But then I saw how she looks now and I was like, okay.
It could work.
She doesn't have the right look to me. I feel like I'm envisioning like all the AI captures this, and maybe it's just I've seen so many of them that now I'm like influenced by it, but there's like a face that like I've seen in real people and they all kind of look the same. It's like a girl with that like really small petite nose, like full lips, like they're just small, like their whole body and frame is small, including all their facial features except for their eyeballs. And that's what I'm envisioning with like big fluffy eyebrows, big ass eyes, the silver hair braided.
Yes.
I don't know. We'll see what they do.
Yeah, we'll see. Oh my gosh. Okay. Sorry to anyone who doesn't care about this.
We didn't even warn you.
Forward.
Yeah. I'm sure if you don't people like this. Okay, if you fast forwarding, stop here.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about ghost shit. Okay. But first, we have a listener story. It's a really quickie.
Amazing.
So I'm just going to read it because it's wild. Okay. So this is from Elizabeth. And she says, my grandmother died in her mid-50s, and my mom actually went into labor at the funeral. On the 1-year anniversary of her death, it was a stormy night, and my aunt couldn't sleep. She was missing their mother and had been thinking about her all day. Her presence could really be felt in the house. And so my aunt got up and went to see what was going on with the weather outside because it was just like a storm was picking up. She opened the door and a big gust of wind blew a picture into the house. She shut the door and picked up the picture and nearly lost her breath. There in her hands was a photo of her and her mother. This photo was once a slide that had never been made into a picture and had actually burned in a house fire before my grandma had passed.
What?
It was chilling, but at the same time very comforting. From that day forward, she knew that the afterlife was for real and her mother was truly watching over her.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that wild?
That's amazing.
I was like, oh, so wild.
Wow. What an amazing experience.
So amazing.
When you're
So
grieving someone.
I know. Yeah. Thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing. That's very sweet.
That was so
cool. And really nice, heartwarming intro to our creepy ass Valentine's Day themed scary stories. Because I have some doozies.
Okay. Yeah.
But you're up first.
Okay. I was just realizing that I didn't get the author's name on here. So I'm going to quickly look it up. Sorry about this. This is not professional.
How unprofessional, you frickin' ghoul.
Let's see.
I want to make a plug for a small business that's on Etsy that ships internationally called Little Ghost Company or Little Ghost Co. Based in the UK. I'm going to demonstrate. Why did I say it like that? Demonstrate. She makes these like beautiful little handmade ceramic ghosties. Look at how cute. For reference.
I love it.
So cute. So he sits on my desk now to remind me that we'll all die someday and come back as ghosts.
Is that a good thing to think about?
Yes. Death unites us all, Amy.
Yes.
I would love to really be able to internalize that in like my meditation practice to like at a young age come to terms with death.
Yes.
I mean, a lot easier said than done. But there's a Buddhist meditation that I guess like Tibetan monks do. It was in the Book of Joy, which is about the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. Mm-hmm. And he explains that they look at these like the series of photos every day that shows a human body in decomposition. And the idea is that like you become like you go through all these emotions, like every day your feeling about it changes. But in time, you sort of like see yourself you see yourself in it, but in a way that's like comforting, of like, okay, yeah, like this is, we're all going to come back to this. Like there's no avoiding this. This will happen to literally everyone.
Yes.
So it's just like accepting it for what it is. And like a lot of them talk about literally having no fear of death as a result. It's just like, yeah,
it's pretty incredible.
It's gonna happen, so whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like not just like without fear, but with like warmth, kind of, because it does unite everyone.
Yes.
Anyway, ghosts, guys.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. That would be a good thing to start. I mean, we're still young, but
yeah,
you never know when it could happen. So
you don't know.
Friends with.
I mean, death. You can't die till we're like 105. So
agreed. Yes. Yep.
I'm watching you.
I'm older than you, so I gotta go first.
Okay. By a month. By a month.
Yeah.
My elder. Yeah, that's true. I'll see you in the next life.
Yep. I feel confident about that, actually.
Yeah, me too. Extremely confident. Yeah.
Yeah.
Feels right. Okay, hit me.
Here we go. This is written by Shut up.
Okay, so wait, who was it written by?
N-cubed-O2.
Okay.
Oh,
nice.
Another tangent. I was watching a video.
We're on one today.
It's just something that I've noticed in my life also, that I guess the California accent tends to like soften T's.
Yes.
And so it's like button
mittens
instead of
exactly.
button.
Yeah.
And I say my T's very harshly.
Yeah. Well, I say exactly, and everyone gives me endless shit for that, but it has a T.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I say button. I will, Noah's last name, I'm not going to announce it here, but it's a name that like it has a T and you should say the T, but it sounds really dumb if you say the T, and he doesn't say the T. No one in his family says the T.
Interesting.
You can think of it in your mind, but so I don't know. That's a weird one because it's like kind of like painful to not say it.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. It's just, what is that? It would be linguistics.
Like the name, like this isn't his last name. Walton. Walton.
Yeah.
But it's more like Walton.
Oh, yeah.
Like they swallow the T. Walton.
Yeah. I get
it. I like the name. But it's like,
yeah.
I don't know.
Understood.
Anywho.
Yeah. I don't know what made me think of that. I guess because I said something weird.
Written by.
Yeah.
No, it was no. Of course you said the T, but like it was the way you said it. This was written by. You sounded like a robot.
Okay. Well, maybe I am.
Maybe I am.
This was written. Yeah, because I did say written instead of written.
This was written by.
Anyway, it was written by N-cubed-O2.
O2. All right.
It is from only 21 days ago.
Ooh, a freshie.
Yeah. Also, it is quite long, so I wrote summaries of stuff already. So
you're good. You're too good to us.
Let's see. I'm also not going to read the title because it gives it away. So,
okay.
Jason and Claire are our characters. They arrive at a cabin in the mountains for a trip. They're in Colorado, actually. And it was a dark and stormy night. And they arrive at the cabin. The door creaks open.
Back on my sound producer bullshit.
Yeah, love it.
Oh God. Okay, sorry. Continue.
Okay, so yeah, Colorado. It's for their anniversary, but their relationship is not going well at this time.
Oh.
So it feels distant and strained.
Okay.
The cabin looked much nicer on the Airbnb posting than it does in real life, but it's still comfortable enough. And The first thing they do, they walk in. Claire is she's very disengaged. She's absorbed in her phone. Jason, is like, I'll start a fire. It'll be cozy. And she's like, ugh. And so they sit together for a second, but then she's like, I'm going to bed. And that he should stay on the couch. So he prepares to spend the night alone, and that feels just how their relationship is going right now. The next morning, Claire and Jason have coffee in the kitchen. Claire is still being very sullen and disengaged, but while they're drinking their coffee, just Jason starts to hear a sound. It kind of sounds like garbled voices that are either talking or singing. He's not totally sure, but Claire says that she can't hear anything. So the narrator suggests that they go out for a walk, and Claire says, this trip will be a lot easier for both of us if we don't have to pretend. Go on your walk. I'll be here on my phone.
Ew, what a brat.
Yeah. So then Jason writes, my anger finally burst forth, having been restrained in an attempt to salvage this trip. You think I'm the one making this harder than it has to be? You're impossible to talk to, Claire. I shouted towards the door. I heard her stand, feet shuffling toward the bedroom door, and it slammed shut. The house groaned in response, then settled, and once more the silence was swallowed up by the faint murmuring noise coming from the hallway. Later that night, the couple is having dinner, and Jason asks if Claire is bothered by the murmuring sound, but she continues to insist that she doesn't hear anything. But at that very moment, the wind of the storm outside dies down for a second, and the murmuring sound gets louder. And Claire whips her head toward the sound, and Jason is like, oh, so you can hear it. And she says, feels vindicated. And she says, fine, I do hear it, but it's just this stupid old cabin falling apart.
She's like Veruca Salt from fucking Daddy, I want it now.
Yeah, she's just a little demon. She's just being annoying. Yeah. But, okay, after dinner they go to bed, but this time Claire invites Jason to stay in the bedroom together rather than staying on the couch.
Okay.
And he has a weird dream about their wedding day. So he wrote, it's ironic, on a trip that was intended to celebrate our 5th anniversary, it was the first time my wedding had even crossed my mind. I dreamt I was at the altar, holding hands with my wife. Her palms felt cold and clammy in my own, and she looked upset. I looked at her, trying to imagine a future in which we could be happy, but her scowl burnt holes through my hope. As the minister began to conclude the ceremony and asked if anyone in the crowd held objections, a voice rang from the audience. I turned towards the crowd and was shocked to see Claire, or yet another Claire. She was dressed comfortably in the sweater she'd worn on our first date. She looked radiant, smiling like how she used to, and was eagerly trying to get my attention. Jason, I love you. Come here to me, please. Don't do this, she cried, as though it were of utmost urgency. I turned back to my bride-to-be and was taken aback to find her withering before me.
Oh.
Her skin sallowed and stretched tight over her bones, her rosy cheeks deflating and her eyes growing darker. I couldn't look away as she guided my hand to her side, wet with blood.
Oh.
I awoke in a cold sweat to the noise from above. It was louder now, unmistakable. Not static exactly, but something uneven and distorted, like voices filtering through a bad connection. I sat up in bed, heart thudding in my chest. Claire stirred beside me, groaning softly. Jason, she mumbled. Do you hear that? I asked, my voice low. She didn't answer right away, but her face tensed as she strained to listen. The sound wasn't just faint anymore. It was distinct, tangible. I could finally make out the noise. Sorry, it was voices. Rushed, muted speech, garbled by a grumbling static, the words muddy and indiscernible. Is that a radio? She asked, sitting up. I think so, I said, already climbing out of bed. We followed the sound into the hallway, our footsteps loud on the creaky floor. The noise grew stronger as we neared the end of the hall, where a pull-down attic door sat flush with the ceiling. "What the hell?" Claire muttered, staring at it. I reached up, tugging the ladder rope down with a loud groan of wood and metal. It didn't budge. Claire fished her phone out of her pajama pocket and shone her flashlight up towards the attic door. There was a small 4-digit padlock holding the door shut. The owners clearly didn't want any guests entering the attic. The noise was much clearer now, a steady static interspersed with faint bursts of garbled speech. "You think the owners left a radio on up there?" I asked. "Maybe," she said, though her tone was uncertain. "We should call them." I nodded, pulling out my phone. The number that was left on the Airbnb listing went straight to voicemail. I left a message, trying to sound calm but insistent. "Guess we'll just have to deal with it for now," I said, uneasy at the thought of leaving it playing all through the night. Claire's expression hardened. "Deal with it? How are we supposed to sleep with that going on?" "I don't know, okay?" I snapped, my annoyance bubbling over and giving way to anger. "What do you want me to do, break in?" Her eyes narrowed. "Don't start." "I'm not starting anything," I shot back. She stormed off without another word, the bedroom door slamming behind her. I stood alone in the hallway, staring up at the attic door. The static buzzed in my ears, louder now, almost rhythmic. It felt like it was waiting for something. So now, the next morning, they are chatting in the kitchen. Claire looks like she didn't sleep at all, and she says it's hard to sleep when there's a radio playing all night. The narrator gets a little snippy, asking what she wants him to do about it, smash the lock and pay for damages, and Claire replies, "It's creepy, it's weird, and you're acting like it's normal." And he says, "I'm not saying it's normal," I said, my patience wearing thin, "but I'm not going to lose my mind over a busted radio in an old house either." Her eyes narrowed and she stepped closer, her voice low and sharp. "You're always like this. You act like I'm crazy for being upset, like everything's my fault because I can't just relax like you." "That's not fair, Claire," I said, my jaw tightening. "You're acting like I put the damn radio there just to piss you off." "Maybe you didn't, but you sure as hell aren't doing anything about it." I opened my mouth to fire back when something stopped me. A voice crackled through the static, clearer and louder than anything we'd heard so far. "You think I'm the one making this harder than it has to be? You're impossible to talk to, Claire."
Oh?
I froze. Claire's eyes widened as she stared at me, her face pale. "Did you hear that?" I hesitated, trying to process what I'd just heard. "It's nothing. Probably just don't," she said, her voice trembling. "Don't tell me that wasn't you." "It wasn't me," I insisted. "Jason, that was exactly what you said to me yesterday." The static broke again. "Stop putting this all on me, Claire. You're just imagining things. I didn't go anywhere tonight." I took a step back, my stomach twisting. It wasn't just the words, it was the cadence, the exact rhythm of my voice. Claire's hands trembled as she pressed them to her forehead. "It's you. You're doing this," she said. "You're trying to mess with me, with my emotions. Do you think this is funny?" "What? No," I said, my own voice rising now. "Claire, how could I even—" "You've been trying to fix this trip from the beginning, haven't you?" She began to hyperventilate, like we could just patch everything up if somehow you controlled the situation. "I'm not controlling anything." The static surged loud enough to make my ears ring, and through it came another burst of words, this time in Claire's voice. "You're so damn selfish, Jason. You only care about fixing things on your terms." Her face crumpled as the words registered, and she looked at me like she'd been slapped. "That's from last summer," she whispered, "when we fought about my job offer. That was me." I opened my mouth to deny it, to tell her she was wrong, but then I heard it again. Her voice, warped but unmistakable, repeating the exact words I'd heard her yell during that fight. "You want to fix everything, Jason? Why don't you fix yourself first?" It wasn't just random. It was us. Also, I chose this story because it's Valentine's Day and it's about a couple, but this couple is having a really hard time.
Yeah, truly.
Mm-hmm.
Valentine's Day breakup.
Yes, exactly. Okay, time blurred into itself, the storm outside returning to bury the cabin in deeper drifts of snow, and the sound upstairs filling our world with a ceaseless, mocking static. At times it would go quiet, just long enough for Claire and me to let our guards down, considering talking about something, anything, beyond our own misery. But right when I thought we might have a chance at conversation, the radio would crackle back to life, louder and more intrusive than before. It was a few days in when I realized that it wasn't just replaying our worst arguments anymore. It was anything we'd spoken to or about each other.
Oh,
I heard my own voice from months ago telling a friend how Claire doesn't see me, how she makes everything a battle. A while later, it shifted to Claire's voice, raw and sobbing, confiding in her sister that she didn't know how much longer she could endure me. I recognized every word, every breath, because I remembered her phone call that night. She'd locked herself in the bathroom, and I'd pressed my ear against the door. I had never regretted being nosy as much as that night. And here it was, echoing through the attic, laid bare. Every time the voice became clearer, I'd see Claire's face tighten, a tortured mix of guilt and fury. We couldn't escape each other's taunts or the house's apparent need to throw them at us like daggers. So Claire's phone signal starts to dwindle, and we know her phone is very important to her. Mm-hmm. And the storm is picking up. That's probably why her phone is not working. And they discuss needing to leave as soon as possible. However, the intensity of the storm is going to make that really dangerous, if not impossible. So they realize they have to stay.
Okay.
So the voices continue to taunt them. Claire talking about how she's planning to leave Jason, and he's completely clueless. Jason talking to his brother, who's telling him how obvious it is that Claire's going to leave, and him basically saying, that'd be great if she would. Jason starts looking around the house for a toolbox because he wants to try to break the lock. And he eventually finds one, but doesn't have the tools they need. So he decides to just start trying random combinations. Mm. And for whatever reason, he decides to put in that day's date, which also happens to be his and Claire's anniversary. And the padlock opens.
Ew.
Weird.
Ew.
Yeah. So they climb up the attic stairs together, and I'll just read the rest. So every detail was meticulously reproduced. The arrangement of the books on the shelves, the crease on the sofa cushion, even the small, almost imperceptible stain on the carpet near the TV stand. It was our home, duplicated with an unsettling precision, as if someone had taken a snapshot of our lives and recreated it here in the dusty confines of the attic. The air was unnervingly still, thick with a tension that seemed almost palpable. It felt as if the room was holding its breath, waiting for us to shatter the quiet. The musty smell that I'd noticed when first entering the cabin was amplified to the extreme, and was permeated with an iron, metallic scent that sent my stomach churning.
Oh, God.
What that means.
Oh.
My eyes swept the room, searching for the source of the voices that had tormented us. We didn't own a radio nor a record player or any speakers for that matter. Instead, my gaze landed on something far more familiar, my laptop, open on the coffee table, its screen aglow. I ran over to the device, tripping over its power cord as I went. The laptop sat neatly on the table as the mouse plugged into it moved of its own accord, clicking the screen every few seconds. My eyes darted to the smudged screen and discovered that it was open to our security app. I'd installed cheap cameras around the apartment soon after we'd moved in. I told Claire that they were there for our own safety, but in truth, they were for me, to revisit our arguments, to replay every fight we had, searching for vindication in the details. That's not healthy.
No, certainly not.
The computer was clicking from clip to clip, playing a highlight reel of every terrible thing we'd ever said to or about each other. Claire joined me, her steps slow, almost reluctant. Her eyes widened in horror as she watched the screen. I looked back down at the laptop only to realize that it had changed once again. I immediately recognized the fight. It was the most recent one before we'd left home. Claire, would you listen to me? It's 2 weeks. You'll live. It'll be nice and quiet. Who says I even want nice and quiet? I want to get back to real life, Jason. I haven't worked in months, and you planning these surprise trips to try to patch things isn't helping me find a job. So what? I cancel the booking? I already paid the deposit, Claire. We can't get that money back. Or did you forget I'm also working a dead-end job? If you want to book that stupid anniversary trip, go right ahead. You just bulldoze ahead like what you want is the only thing that matters. I watched myself furrow my brow and then put my head in my hand. Claire, I'm trying here. I really am. But I can never get through to you, can I? First, it was you passing on the job offer when we needed that money. Then it was that thing with your ex. I told you nothing happened, Jason. He just stopped by for coffee is all. Claire, I'm not stupid. You turned off the cameras, but the audio was still recording, you idiot. Idiot.
Channeling Dwight. Idiot.
Mm-hmm.
No, not Dwight.
Don't you dare call me an idiot after all I've done for you. I watched as Claire had stormed towards me and our fight was about to escalate. She pounced at me, but I threw her off me towards the kitchen. I watched her crack her head on the edge of the table and fall through it. I walked up to the table slowly. I observed her breathing grow shallow as she lay spasming on the floor. I watched her breathing stop as blood slowly pooled around her. I watched myself stand up calmly, then walk into our bedroom. A minute later, I left, quietly wheeling our luggage towards the front door and leaving as my wife lay motionless. Then, as if sensing its audience had seen enough, the laptop's battery icon flashed once, critical, and the screen went black. The sudden death of the device plunged me back into silence and darkness, a quiet so deep it was almost suffocating. The absence of the voices, which had been such a constant and invasive presence, now left a shallow emptiness that was somehow worse than the noise. I sat for a moment, unable to process what I'd just seen. I turned my flashlight up towards Claire, only to see that I was now alone in the room, the dull smell of iron growing ever stronger from the kitchen. I shakily turned my flashlight on again, this time towards the kitchen table, shrouded in a cloak of darkness that I hadn't dared breach since I ascended the attic ladder. There, lying crumpled in a heap of splintered wood, lay my wife. Dried blood had pooled around her head, and I winced at noticing that her neck was bent at an unnatural angle.
God. Amy's worst nightmare.
Yep, ignore that. She had begun to bloat and stiffen, and the closer I stepped, the more the iron scent of blood was replaced with a musky, rotten smell. She was almost entirely a corpse, save for her eyes. Fresh and watery, they were locked onto me, silently accusing me. Claire, I whispered, praying with every fiber that somehow she was still in there. But she didn't respond, didn't move. She lay frozen, staring intently, eyes following me as I nervously swayed. The air around us grew colder, denser, as if the room itself was closing in, feeding off the rising panic. Then, almost imperceptibly, Claire began to whisper.
No.
Why are you talking, Claire?
What's up there?
The words were soft, disjointed murmurs at first, guttural sounds forcing their way out of a broken, bloated throat. As I drew closer, the whispers grew clearer, sharper. They were not the comforting words I yearned for, but a continuation of the cascade of cruel, cutting phrases I had grown accustomed to. You never really cared, did you, Jason? It was always about you. Her voice was a ghost, devoid even of its usual disdain, hollow and haunting. I stood frozen as her whispers intensified, layering upon each other in relentless cold assault. And it just goes through more of what she said. Overwhelmed and unable to bear it, I dropped to my knees, the cold of the floor seeping into my bones. Claire's figure, crumpled across from mine, began to crunch as her frame contorted itself so she could continue to lock eyes with me.
Ew, dude!
It's a lot. Her expression was blank, but her eyes piercing as she continued her litany of grievances. I crawled, sobbing, searching in the dark for the attic door that led me here, but it had long vanished. The floor was solid. As the roar of the frozen...
fucked, Jason.
Yep, he's donezo.
Oh my God.
As the roar of the frozen world outside began to muffle, snow piling against our artificial windows, her voice was the only sound, a relentless echo in the ghostly replica of our apartment. Her words didn't stop for hours, and by the time she began to quiet, she had managed to stand up and loom over me, cold and pale, whispering accusations and curses at me in the dark. It has been weeks since the door to the outside vanished, leaving me trapped in my own home with the whispering thing that was once my wife. Claire, or the thing that used to be her, grows more gaunt by the day, her features sharpening, her eyes sinking deeper into her skull. She's starting to smell worse, but she keeps whispering. She isn't going to harm me, not physically. She can't. Her body, crumbling and decaying, only has the energy to torment me with its gaze and with its words. I've tried the front door, but I don't think it's any more than decoration in this mockery of my home. It doesn't lead outside. It doesn't even open. It's just part of the wall. The storm outside has not abated. I can hear it sometimes through the thick snow that covers my windows. If the snow ever subsides, the windows may be my only chance at escape. I'm typing this now as both a record and a plea. If you're reading this, if this somehow finds its way to someone, anyone, do you know when the blizzard will let up? Is there any forecast about when the snow will start to melt? It's cold in here, and I don't think I can listen to her for much longer. And that's the end.
That Airbnb is about to get a really bad rating.
Yeah, a horrible rating.
Oh my God.
So, I don't really know what to think. Like, is he in purgatory, or is she a demon?
I don't know.
I have
nothing
no idea.
Good.
No. Yep, nothing good.
Nothing good.
Is that Airbnb a portal to something?
Something's
happening.
Something is definitely happening. That is so gross. That I was not expecting that. And that last scene. Ugh.
Yeah. No, it's a lot.
I'm covered in goosebumps. That is so gross. Okay, well, we're going to get romantic with it. Are you ready?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. This is by Magpie Quill. I used to get love letters tucked inside fortune cookies. Cute.
Ooh, very cute.
Say what you would about American Chinese food. I would argue it's its own cuisine. Once you get past the classic complaints of it's not authentic and it's so unhealthy, the snobbish distaste toward boxed Chinese food at the mall is wholly undeserved. Who doesn't enjoy a plate of fast food noodles with a side chosen from a very nearly infinite menu of deep fried chicken tossed in chili peppers, cashews, or, heaven forbid, oranges? The paragon of the American Chinese cuisine is the fortune cookie. Terribly unhealthy and definitely not Chinese at all, but it's sweet and crunchy with a message inside that can be taken with a lighthearted laugh. There's nothing to dislike about that. I worked a summer job in Houston where the Chinese restaurant at the local mall served every boxed meal with a house-made fortune cookie. The store had a little glass window in its kitchen where a college-aged part-timer sat, whipping meringue for the batter and handwriting fortunes with a blue ballpoint pen, while the cookies baked in the oven behind him. Sometimes I could see his manager standing at the stove off to the side, tossing a pan of noodles and glancing through the glass at the waiting customers. The restaurant was my go-to when I didn't want to cook dinner or when I needed an excuse to walk around the mall after a particularly dull day at work. They offered deliveries, but I enjoyed the bustle of the mall, and besides, the food would be cold by the time it arrived at my house. My favorite order was chow mein with a side of General Tso's chicken, though sometimes I switched it up with fried wontons. After my meal, I would break open the fortune cookie and read some charmingly inconsequential fortune the part-timer behind the glass window had written. One day, I broke open the cookie and saw the message that was a little longer than usual, written in a tiny, cramped handwriting to fit it all onto the slip of paper. So there's something in Mandarin. And then it says, it means, I love you, but I don't know how to let you know. My eyes went wide. I looked at the glass of the kitchen where the part-timer was folding the fortune cookies. He looked up at the same time and our eyes met, just for a moment. Then he quickly looked down and placed a cookie on his baking tray. I wasn't sure of what to do, so for a small while I watched him work. The cookies came out of the oven in little soft discs. He placed a fortune on each disc and quickly folded them into the familiar shape. As he lined up the cookies on his baking tray to cool and harden, he looked up at me again. I gave him a small wave. He looked genuinely surprised, and his eyes lit up with a nervous smile. The next time I bought a meal, I cracked open the cookie first. The same cramped handwriting to fit a longer than average message on a small slip of paper greeted me. You're beautiful, and I hope you know that. I wish you nothing but the brightest of days. I looked at the window to the kitchen. The part-timer broke into a grin as if he had been discreetly waiting for me to look his way. I smiled, and his ears turned pink. The fortune cookie messages kept coming. I frequented the restaurant even more than before. The fortunes were something I looked forward to now. How was your day? Make a face at the window and I'll be looking if I'm not too busy. I wonder what you think of me. If I talk to you, I think I might just ruin it all. I'm writing this while you're not here. That means I miss you. He writes something in Mandarin and says, that means I miss you. Sometimes the wall of the kitchen feels like such a distance. I catch glimpses of you from here and it's never enough. After that last message, I turned over the slip of paper, took out a pen, and wrote my name and number on the back of the fortune. Then I walked up to the window to the kitchen and tapped on the glass. The part-timer started and looked up from his work. I held up my message against the window. His eyes widened as he broke into a grin. He quickly pulled an empty slip of paper from a box and copied down my number, knocking over a bottle of vanilla extract in his haste. His manager walked over from the commotion and scowled at him, then turned to look at me. I quickly lowered my hands and stuffed the message in my pocket. Something by the stove started smoking, and the manager rushed to put out a grease fire, saving both me and the part-timer any further embarrassment. That night, after eagerly awaiting for what felt like hours, my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. 9:45 p.m. When you told me your name, it occurred to me that you didn't know mine all this time. Hi, I'm Kai. Kai and I exchanged texts all night and all day and talked on the phone for hours on end. Even though his words weren't confined to slips of paper inside fortune cookies anymore, Kai's special fortunes I got with my order whenever I ate at the restaurant still made me smile. I wish you'd look at me more when you eat, but I understand the lure of food, so I forgive you. You look especially beautiful today. I wish this glass wasn't here. Sometimes I just wait for you to show up, you know? Once when I entered the restaurant, I looked at the kitchen window and noticed Kai wasn't there. Before I could wonder where he'd gone, the steel door to the kitchen opened and he came out holding 2 cups of ice-cold lemon tea. I hope you like lemon, he said, smiling sheepishly, or else I might have to go back to the kitchen and make something else. What are you doing? I asked, admittedly flustered, though I wasn't sure why. I realized that I had never seen him standing. He was taller than I had expected. I got out early today. We can have a stupid middle school mall date. I grinned, took the lemon tea, and jabbed the straw toward the door to the kitchen. Somebody's getting in trouble for this. Kai turned just in time to see his manager frowning back at him before the door slipped closed. Whatever. He's half a step from firing me anyway for being so distracted. He raised an eyebrow at me meaningfully, and I laughed. Come on, let's get out of here. There's better food to be had on our first date. That evening, with a stuffed rabbit plushie from the arcade tucked under my arm and the sweetness of vanilla ice cream on the tip of my tongue, Kai gently leaned me up against the counter of the breezeway and kissed me. I laid awake in bed that night, far past midnight, because I couldn't stop thinking about it and smiling. I pulled out my phone and began typing. 1:08 a.m. How do you say I miss you again? In Chinese, I mean. I didn't receive a reply for a few minutes. Just when I decided he must be asleep, my phone lit up. 1:15 a.m. Haha, I don't speak Chinese, actually. My parents do. Maybe I can ask them, with a little tongue sticking out. I blinked and then started typing again. But what about the fortune cookie you wrote that one time? Fortune? You wrote, I miss you. I did? When? Hello? Are you awake? I stared at his messages for a long time. My thumbs moved stiffly. You wrote messages for me in the fortune cookies. It was his turn to go silent. I waited, my heart starting to pound a sickening beat. When the messages came, my throat went dry. The cookies are made days in advance, and all I've ever written in them are horoscopes and lucky numbers. I just put them all in a basket. I don't assemble the meals. The person who does that is my manager. I stared at my desk where I had carefully kept all of the fortunes Kai had written for me. My phone started ringing, but I didn't pick up. It ran for a long, long time. Then it stopped. Then it rang again for a shorter while, and then a message appeared. 1:54 a.m. What has he been writing to you? It's going to be okay. Whatever happened, I'm going to help you figure it out, okay? My hands trembled as I typed. Okay, I think... Do you really think it's him? It has to be, okay? He doesn't know my address or anything, right? Do I call the police? Kai? I waited desperately for a response, and at this point it's 2:13 a.m. For some reassurance, I laid in bed staring blankly at my screen. I waited until fatigue took over, until my eyelids grew heavy despite everything, until I fell asleep vaguely wondering why he'd stopped texting. The next morning, he was all over the news. The article said that he was found by around 5 a.m. by an early morning jogger who noticed the blood on the doorstep to his apartment. He had been long dead by then. He was murdered. Yeah, the police were searching all over for the perpetrator. The most horrifyingly sensationalized article said his body was found missing all its teeth. I didn't go to work for days after that. In fact, I didn't set foot outside my house for a good while. I ordered food and watched television and tried not to look at the rabbit plushie sitting on my dresser. 2 days in, I couldn't bear its brown doll eyes and I stuffed it underneath my bed. My clueless coworkers messaged me asking where I was, and my boss called me a few times, but I didn't pick up. They never caught the murderer. A little less than a week into this self-isolation, I heard a knock on my door and got up thinking it was the cheap pasta I'd ordered for lunch. When I opened the door, a young woman was standing there with a plastic bag in her hand, but the smell that wafted through the air was not the acidic tang of marinara. Chow mein and General Tso's chicken, she droned, right? I stared at her like she had turned into the monster of my nightmares. She raised an eyebrow. Do I have the wrong address? I kept staring. The woman crossed her arms. Did you order this or not? The manager said you would know what to do, whatever that means. My hand moved on its own, and the deliverer rolled her eyes as I took the bag from her. She left before I could say anything else. I closed my door and opened the bag like there might be something terrible inside. But it was the familiar meal, the quintessential American Chinese takeout, complete with a fortune cookie. The fortune cookie. It was slightly lumpy in shape, and at first I thought it was because the manager didn't have the deft hands that Kai did. But after a moment, I realized that all my cookies had been folded by the manager, and all of those had looked perfect. So I picked up the cookie. There was a sickening weight to it, one last warning before I could break it open. I put my thumbs against the two tips of the cookie and pulled. There was a sharp crack of hardened sugar and meringue breaking at the seam. 3 white teeth bounced onto the table, still flecked with bits of dried blood. Along with them, a slip of paper with tiny, cramped handwriting. Stop flirting with him. You're supposed to be mine.
Ew. No.
Be mine. Happy Valentine's Day.
Be mine. Ew.
My hands are sweaty.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really creepy.
Ooh. Okay, I could predict that the teeth were coming.
Yes, the teeth. Yeah. Because it's such a striking detail. Mm-hmm. Yes, but well, he knows who the murderer is, so that's good, I guess.
Scary.
Yeah. And I have one more love letter themed one.
Yes.
Okay.
Let's hear it.
This is from Curses and Boons, and this is from 28 days ago, so also another freshie.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And this is, I keep getting love letters even though my husband died a year ago, and they're making me sick.
Yikes.
Okay. They say, yikes. It was never going to be him. I was with him as he sat in a hospital bed. I was with him as he was lowered into the ground, and I was with him as I gave him flowers every week. So I knew it was never going to be him. But love makes us do illogical things. Grief of love, especially so. We fell in love with each other fast. It was the second year of college. Dylan was the charming bartender who could get any number, and I was the waitress who flirted with anyone to get big tips. Despite that, we fell for each other, and we fell hard. We couldn't spend a moment away from each other, with every night being a date and every weekend being a small road trip to neighboring cities. Everything we did was together, and everything we were was each other. After college, we obviously moved in together, and it wasn't a month later that Dylan got down on one knee and I said yes. The wedding was nothing extravagant, just our close family and friends in an old chapel outside the city. The peeling white paint and earwig-infested wood was all a part of the charm for us. We didn't need a spectacular venue, we just needed each other, because we loved each other. Even after the wedding, our honeymoon phase never ended. We still loved each other just as much as the day we met, even until the end. The letters started about 6 months after we'd gotten back from our honeymoon trip. Dylan had just gotten transferred into a new position at the software company where he worked in the neighboring city. Too far to commute and too close for us to unearth our life. I had just gotten a promotion at the hospital where I was working, and I really didn't want to move. Dylan, being the amazing husband he was, assured me that everything was going to be fine. The position was hybrid, only requiring him to be away a week of every month, and with his new salary, he could easily rent out a small apartment to use during that time. Still, I worried to have such periods apart from each other so soon after our wedding. Perhaps we were a little codependent, but it was no problem. And that's how the letters started. The letters from my Dylan. During the last week of every month, Dylan would send a letter updating me on what he was up to during the week he was away. With every note also professing his unending love and how much he missed me. We still did phone calls, of course, and more often than not, he would arrive back home before the letter did. We'd then read them together in bed with me wrapped in his arms. It was very nice. Dylan had a fascination with the antique romance of posting a letter to me. He even thrifted an old typewriter that he kept in his apartment away from home that was solely dedicated to sending our love letters. Its brass keys corroded with age, containing small misalignments like the E key being slightly raised when compared to every other character in the sentence. Dylan even aged all the paper and envelopes to give it a more authentic feel, adding a cherry red seal on top of every letter stamped with our initials in a heart. It was cute, and it felt like I was the Juliet to his Romeo. But of course, that story also ends in tragedy. It was the weekend before Christmas when he was driving back from his last week away. The route he took home used back streets through farmlands and forests, with only the faintest signs of civilization being seen. The rotten wooden fences lining each side of the road encased rarely seen cows. There were no streetlights and very few stop signs, which allowed Dylan to get home quickly. But most importantly, he passed by the old chapel that we got married in. It had been several years since then, with the chapel falling into further disarray and abandonment. The antique vintage feel that Dylan so loved now falling into rot and decay. But still, he loved to drive by it. I won't go into detail about the accident, just that it was dark and the squall of snow that night only allowed for a few feet of vision. When the hospital I worked at called me and told me to come, I did so without a second thought. I knew he wasn't going to make it, but we still spent all of our moments together just as we always had. Dylan even left me one last letter to be read the week after he was gone, a final profession of his love and a goodbye, stamped with the same cherry red seal that contained our initials in a heart. The grief hit me really hard, and it still hits me even now, especially with everything that's happened. Packing up the apartment he had was the worst part. The place was barren, with only the basic necessities, with the exception of the writing desk. It was a testament to us. Framed photographs of our wedding day littered the large mahogany. Dozens of stacks of yellowed paper and jars of red wax reminded me of his scent. Then there was the typewriter, its dark body and brass keys well oiled and cleaned of any dust. I'm not ashamed in the least to admit that I cried the entire night as I packed it all into boxes. It was a month after Dylan had passed when I found the next letter on the welcome mat of our front door. It was gently placed right in the center, facing the door and with its red seal. Originally, I didn't think anything was amiss. I even smiled as I picked it up and brought it inside to be read. I thought it was simply one of his letters that had just been delayed in the mail. Even reading the letter, nothing was strange at first. It wished me a Merry Christmas and expressed that it was excited to see me soon. It distinctly ended with, "Until death do us part, Dylan." I thought it was kind of a check-in with me to make sure I was doing well as he was away. I was wrong. The next letter arrived. Same time as the others, at the start of every month, no matter how struck with grief I was, I could think logically, and I knew that something was wrong. However, there seemed to be nothing strange with the letter. It detailed what he had been doing the last week, telling me that, well, she starts calling him it. Detailed what it had been doing the last week, telling me that it was working hard for me and that it was excited to see me soon. It professed its love and signed using Dylan's name, "Until death do us part." I wanted to throw the letter in the garbage. I knew there was nothing connecting this letter to Dylan. Even so, it was so nice to hear its words telling me how loved I was, so I couldn't really throw it away. Still, I questioned how it could be happening. It was written on the same aged paper that Dylan exclusively used, and the small details in the keys of his typewriter were still present. I even suspected that Dylan's materials had been stolen, but when I frantically checked the boxes in the basement, everything was where it was supposed to be. The next month, the letter arrived again, gently placed at the front door. This time, things were seemingly a little more honest, and that actually assured me for some reason. It addressed my worries that I was probably confused, that it still loved me and was doing everything it could to be with me, and it told me things that only Dylan would know. Little details about our wedding, whispers only we shared in phone calls as he drove from work. It was stupid, but it actually made me feel a little convinced that he was sending me these letters. Like I said, love makes us do stupid things. So I kept the connection going. At the start of every month, I would read a letter from my dead husband. It wasn't good for my grief. It delayed the process, and I knew it was unhealthy, but I just couldn't let it go. I kept reading the letters, happy that my husband had somehow come back in some form. However, small things began to spoil that happiness. It always does start with the small things. At first, it was the constant insistence that it was excited to see me again soon. In every letter, it would insist that we would meet face to face soon. It unnerved me, but I thought ultimately that it was similar to how people reassure those in grief that they'll eventually be with their loved ones again. But still, Dylan in the letters repeatedly told me that we would be with each other again. It told me that it loved me and would not stop until we could be together. They also rarely spoke of our time together or how we'd met. And when they did, it was really only alluding to vague details in the day of our wedding, details that repeated themselves in different ways, but were still limited to a small few. At some point, I also noticed that none of the letters contained any form of postage. No address to return to the sender and no address to which to be sent. This prevented me from ever being able to send my own letter to him, and it was as if the letters were being hand-delivered to my door. But I was never able to capture the exact moment they arrived or how they did so. Then there would be the letters themselves. Before, they would be tastefully aged, using some of mine and Dylan's favorite teas to ensure the smell persisted on the page. The letters were slowly arriving yellowed and stained. They smelled sickly sweet and had kind of an oily grime that stuck to my fingers and stained them a cigarette yellow. I could even see what seemed to be fingerprints imprinted on the stains, an oil that was present before I held the letter myself. The red seal on the front had browned to resemble a dirty sanguine color, with the initials hardly visible. And most importantly, the ink that the letter was written in was a brownish smearing substance that smudged at little contact. The clean writing that professed its love for me was rotten. I went down to the basement once, where Dylan's writing supplies were being kept, just to see, and couldn't bear to look inside the mildew and leaking boxes. That's also when the sickness started. I didn't connect it to the letters, I couldn't, but I began to slowly deteriorate in health. At first it was a cough, phlegm and mucus filling my lungs and throat, clinging to my insides and cloying at every breath. Then my body started to turn feverish. My skin leaked sweat at all hours, regardless of the temperature, taking on a feverish jaundice yellow, which was accompanied by a musty scent that mixed horribly with my constant attempts at treatment with deodorant and soap. With every new letter, it felt like my condition only worsened, as if they were poisoning me. But I couldn't go without them. Even as my fingers and toes started to blacken and leak from gangrene, I couldn't possibly connect it to the letters. I didn't think Dylan would hurt me, and I thought the same of the letters. I was so weak I had to quit work, but at least I had my letters and their love for me. It was a little over a year after they began that the letters asked me to meet them, face to face. At first, I believed they meant the graveyard where Dylan was buried, which I visited on multiple occasions, but clearly that wasn't it. The letters told me it was possible for us to see each other again in the flesh. It stressed that very explicitly, that we could see each other in the flesh. So I drove out to the old chapel where we got married. It was dark on the road, and the frozen rain that pelted the ground filled potholes with ice and slush. The spring melt had just begun, leaving behind the pristine white landscape and replacing it with a dirty brown slurry of slush that brought with it the smell of all the decaying nature that was buried beneath the ground for an entire season. When I finally arrived at the chapel, it was no different. The building was a far sight from where we had gotten married. The wood was rotting through, and there was no cross. The front door was open, though, inviting me in. So I went. It's a small building, only a single room filled with pews and an altar at the front. So there was nothing blocking me from seeing the yellowed papers covering every wall and the man standing at the back of the church, barely visible in the darkness. It was Dylan. It looked like Dylan. It looked exactly like Dylan, as I had seen him last. It waved me over with Dylan's broken arm and smiled at me with his mouth full of missing teeth. It wore the suit he was wearing the day I married him and buried him. It wore the face I loved and looked at me with eyes that were not the color of my husband's. I wanted to leave right then, but the idea of turning my back away from Dylan terrified me. I don't know if it was the fear of never seeing him again or the fear of what the thing wearing Dylan would do to me that terrified me. Then it coughed out in a voice that did not resemble my husband's. In sickness and in health. And I ran as fast as I could until I couldn't hear it laughing behind me from the old chapel. I eventually limped to a farmer's house in the dead of night where they called me an ambulance. I was admitted to a hospital where my colleagues looked at me with such concern and pity. I was so sick, so many different viruses and toxins in my system. Quiet down, Dave.
Sorry about that.
I was so sick. So many different viruses and toxins in my system. I don't even know how I'm alive. I left my car at the chapel, but I'm too terrified to go back for it, to confirm what I saw, to see Dylan again. I've been released from the hospital, but the letters won't stop coming. It's every day now. I haven't opened them, but I don't know how to stop them. I've tried the postal service, but they aren't delivering them. Does anyone know what I can do? Does anyone know what's happening? Please, I don't know where else to ask. The letters say, until death do us part, and I'm scared that might mean for me too.
Yeah.
Creepy.
Sounds like it.
Undying love.
Whoa, that is a good story.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Weird.
I feel like the no sleep stories are getting like better written over time.
Yes.
Because I think people kind of like are like, edit that. The grammar is bad.
Yeah.
But they're pretty
good. Higher standard
now. Exactly. Higher standard, exactly.
So I think some stories from No Sleep have been like turned into movies, or maybe not movies, but
well, like the Dear David thing. I mean, I guess that was Twitter, but it's like that. Although I still don't know if that was real.
Yeah.
So
who knows? Yeah.
So
but there was one author that like now is a big time movie writer or something.
Really?
Because of
oh, that's so cool.
No Sleep.
Oh my god, I love that. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
So standards are high.
Standards are high.
Mm-hmm.
Are you little sexy little spookies? You little sexy little spooky little
those
babies.
Those are some sexy stories we just told.
Yeah, baby. So don't kill your spouse.
Mm-hmm.
If your dead spouse starts sending you letters, don't let them. Mm-hmm. Don't read them.
Or don't meet them.
Yeah, definitely don't meet them. Yeah, don't do that. And then also, if someone's writing you personalized fortune cookie notes, find a new Chinese spot.
Yeah. Okay. That's for the best.
Or your new boyfriend's going to end up dead with no teeth.
Yes.
So.
Toothless. Yeah.
On that cheery note, have a great Valentine's Day. Mm-hmm. Romantic.
Yeah. Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day. You guys can send us your stories via DM, email, girlsgonespooky@gmail.com, or our website, girlsgonespooky.com. We'll see you next week. And until then, stay spooky.
Stay spooky. Bye.
Bye.